Welcome to the Tea Studio, our small little haven of peace and quiet. So we do guided tea tastings at the front of the studio here, where visitors get to pick 3 teas from the range, and we do an in-depth tasting of each one, brewed Gongfu style over multiple infusions. So when people see us brewing tea Gongfu style for the first time, it all can look a little bit complicated. There's all the different tools that you seem to need, all the various steps that's required to brew the tea. When you break it all down though and look at it, the essence of Gongfu tea brewing isn't all that complicated. Now if you're new to Gongfu tea brewing, or if you just want to simplify things and get your setup down to its most minimal, here are 2 basic setups for brewing tea Gongfu style. So start with a plate or tray to keep it all together. Nothing complex or technical needed, just something to keep all the bits and pieces together and to catch any spills that you may have when you're brewing the tea. Your brewing vessel. Now typically a gaiwan is the best place to start. They're simple, elegant and inexpensive. Try and pick one that isn't too wide or too tall, otherwise it might be a little bit awkward to pour if you're not used to brewing tea in this way. If the gaiwan is a bit too wide, it might be a little bit hard to grab. If it's too tall, it might be a little bit imbalanced when you go to sort of pour the tea. If they're too tall, it can be weighted to the bottom and makes it a little bit awkward to pour. It's also a good idea to find a gaiwan that has a decent rim as well, as not only does it make it easier for you to pick up, it also makes it less likely for you to burn yourself as well, because the heat, it's usually around the body and not necessarily around the rim, so you will need to use the rim to pick up the gaiwan. And yeah, if you have a decent lip around it or a decent rim around it, it's easier to pick up, and also it makes it easier to pour as well, and you'll be less likely to burn yourself on hot tea. In terms of material, I find porcelain works best when it comes to gaiwans. Not only do they brew tea really well, but also you can appreciate the nuances of the tea better in that the aromas of the tea sticks to the inside of the gaiwan lid. So aside from smelling the leaves itself, to appreciate the aroma of the tea, you can also smell the inside of the gaiwan lid for more nuance and a different dimension. A fairness cup to decant your tea into. So pretty simple, it doesn't need to be anything fancy. Any cup will do really, but what you want is something that does have a bit of a spout on it so that it pours well. Otherwise, if you're using just a standard ordinary cup, you'll find that you'll be, when you go to pour your tea, you'll be getting tea everywhere. And the reason why it's called a fairness cup is because you decant the tea into this cup and then everyone gets the same infusion. And so in a sense, it's all fair. Small teacups to drink from. So small cups help you better appreciate the tea that you're drinking. You can taste more of the nuances of the tea better when you're drinking from these small cups. And the thing is, once you finish the tea in that cup, you have a lot of the aroma sticking to the inside of that cup, and so you can use that much like the inside of the gaiwan lid to appreciate more of the nuances in the tea's aroma. So the method. Essentially it comes down to 3 key principles: a greater leaf to water ratio, quick steeps, and multiple infusions. So to start, put the kettle on and bring the water to boil. As you're waiting, pop a handful of loose leaf tea into your gaiwan. You don't need to be too precise, but as I mentioned before, you want to use a greater leaf to water ratio, so you want to use quite a bit of leaves for the size of your gaiwan. Essentially, your gaiwan should look something like this. Now, once your water has come to temperature, pour the water into the gaiwan and be careful not to pour too much, otherwise you might end up burning your fingers. So using the gaiwan lid, you swirl the leaves a little and make sure they're all soaked and submerged. Then place it back on the body, leaving a small gap. Now using your index finger to balance the top of the lid, the thumb and the other fingers to hold on to the rim of the gaiwan, pick it up and pour the tea into the fairness cup. So now you can use the inside of the gaiwan lid to appreciate the aroma of the tea. So you can smell the wet leaves and smell the inside of the gaiwan lid to get a full understanding of your tea's aroma. This first infusion is a quick rinse and usually no more than 5 seconds or so, and it's typically discarded. So the purpose here is to wash the leaves of any dust or debris, but it also serves to loosen up the tea leaves as well, so that on your subsequent infusions you get a more balanced and even extraction. There's a bit of an old, somewhat slightly chauvinistic saying when it comes to tea infusions, that the first infusion is for your enemies, the second is for your wife, and the third is for yourself, implying that the third infusion when it comes to Gongfu brewing is typically the best one. So once you've discarded that first rinse for your enemies, repeat the process, steeping your teas for no more than 5 to 10 seconds each time, and decant into the fairness cup, and you're ready to enjoy your first sip of tea. So you can repeat this process until basically there's no more flavor left in the tea. Now, generally speaking, say for example when it comes to oolong teas, like a decent oolong tea, you should be able to get at least 6 or so infusions out of them. And with other teas such as pu'er, you should be able to go even further at 10 plus infusions. So a variation of this is the Chao style Gongfu tea setup. With this variation, you still have your brewing vessel, and so everything that was said about the gaiwan before applies here. We don't have the fairness cup, and instead of one small teacup, you have 3. And your tea tray needs to be a lot deeper so that it can hold a lot more spilled tea, because with this variation, it's going to result in a lot of spilled tea. So in general, the brewing methods and principles are the same. You're using a greater leaf to water ratio, quick steeps, and multiple infusions. The key difference is, though, when you go to decant your tea, instead of pouring it into a fairness cup, you're pouring it directly into the small teacups. So the reason that they omit the fairness cup in Chao Gongfu style brewing is because they don't consider the fairness cup to be very fair at all. Different people have different strength preferences when it comes to their tea. So for the guest that enjoys their teas a little bit lighter, they might get that first pour. For the guest that enjoys their tea a little bit stronger, they'll get the ones from the bottom, more towards the bottom of the gaiwan. And the last crucial step are the droplets. These final drops of tea have been sitting in the gaiwan for a little bit longer. That tea is going to be a little bit stronger. And so these droplets are used to kind of balance the flavor of the tea that you're serving. So for the guest that enjoys their tea a little bit stronger, they're going to receive perhaps a few more of these droplets in their cup compared to the guest that likes their tea a little bit lighter. Traditional Chao Gongfu tea brewing requires a whopping 21 steps, and it's can be quite an involved process. The version that I've showed you today is more like a day-to-day simplified version that most people, like that the people of Chao would use on a day-to-day basis. So I guess what makes either of these processes look a little bit more complicated than perhaps they really are is that it's a more active style of tea brewing. So from the point where you put your tea leaves into your vessel to when you're taking that first sip of tea, you're always doing something. Whereas if you're brewing in a teapot, you kind of put the tea leaves in, put the water in, and then there's a long period of waiting and doing nothing. There's an analogy that I really like when it comes to comparing these two styles of tea brewing, in that think of it like going on a holiday. You can either take a flight to your destination, so going from point A to point B as quick as possible. That's brewing tea in a teapot. Or on the other hand, you can turn your holiday into a road trip where you're making a lot of stops along the way to explore and discover new things. That's Gongfu tea brewing. So neither is better or worse. One is all about the destination, the other is about the journey to get there. So that's the end of our video today. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.